So our next speaker is Reverend Brenda Boss. She's a pastor of Christ Lutheran Church in San Clemente, and I got to know her partly because she just took it on herself to begin doing some grassroots organizing among pastors in San Clemente, which I think is a bit of an uphill climb. So I'm interested in hearing what Brenda has to say. Brenda Boss.
Thank you. It is true that I have a church in San Clemente, California, and perhaps you've heard a little bit of news about us lately as a city who is having a very difficult time with any compassion around homelessness. So the church I serve has a service that meets on North Beach, which is exactly the hot spot of where the homeless are living right now in San Clemente. And I've been there for 5 years, and the first year that I was there, we meet every Sunday morning on the beach, and sometime during the service, always a different time, there would be a local homeless guy that would come down the center aisle of this beach service and come up to the altar and bow very reverently and leave flowers that he had picked from one of the bushes near the train station where he hung out. And every Sunday, this would happen. I could be standing in the middle of right there, preaching, and he would walk right past me. I could be praying. There was a time that he interrupted communion to ask for something. And so this was part of our congregation. And I saw the rest of the congregation joyfully receive him and speak to him and talk with him afterwards. And he called everybody Brother Mark and Sister Kathy, and everybody loved this guy. And I said to the congregation, this is unique that we do this. And they said, what are you talking about? I said, this is unique that you're so comfortable with a homeless person. I mean, sometimes he's drunk, not always. It was very early in the morning. But, you know, he could be in any state of mind, and they welcomed him. And I said, this is a thing. And they said, what are you talking about? You're just nice to people. I said, yeah, not everybody's nice to people. And so I realized that this was a call for this congregation to actually be caring about homelessness and be advocates in the community. And pretty quickly we became involved with a program that had lunch once a week on a Sunday at a park. And they invited about 30 people. It was started by another church in San Clemente. But it wasn't just pass out a lunch and go away. It would be sit with the people who are experiencing homelessness for at least a half hour, if not longer, and talk to them. One of my favorite stories ever was a homeless couple who lived in a camper speaking to one of my congregants about plumerias and how much they loved flowers. And I thought, how often do people who experience homelessness get to talk about flowers? And so we continued to be sort of interested in just sort of that, being in relationship with homeless. And then I ran into a member of Supervisor Lisa Bartlett's staff. She's the supervisor of the 5th District in Orange County. And I said to him, does Supervisor Bartlett have any sort of round table in which she meets with faith leaders and we can talk about sort of the moral imperative to care for the poor? And he said, no, you should start that. Right? I mean, that's a good politician. And I said, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I started to put the word out that we were going to have these forums. And at first it was going to be an educational thing where we taught pastors and rabbis and imams and anybody that wanted to be part of the faith community about homelessness. But I kept wanting it to also have the faith element. And it kept being these educational events, but I wanted it to be about what does God call us to do? Because if we're not acting as faith leaders, we're just another bunch of concerned citizens. And what was our power? And so I kept wanting it to have that piece of it, and we just sort of never got there. And I knew that there were people that were coming, and I think the good news about that Faith Leaders Forum was that I did meet Mark, I met Rabbi Marcia, I met other people that were interested in this kind of work, and they took it and formed this Orange County Alliance for Just Change. And then one day, we didn't have a meeting, and we were waiting for Supervisor Bartlett's office to sort of tell us what to do next, and I got invited to my own meeting. And I thought, did I get fired? And they were having another forum with the same content and the same logo, and I sort of said, well, what happened? I don't know, is the short answer. And I finally got the huevos to call Supervisor Bartlett's office and say, did I get fired from my own meeting? And they said, no, the other guy just wanted to take it over, and so he did. Now, this was a pastor who had a larger church and was a male. And I thought perhaps they decided politically it made more sense to have him organizing instead of me, a female pastor in Orange County in a tiny little church. I don't know. But after that meeting, United to End Homelessness started, and that's one of the organizations that's part of this alliance. But United to End Homelessness is using a model that was used in Orange County, Florida, to help end homelessness in Orange County, California. And the model is that we're going to use all the different pillars of the community. We're going to have landlords, we're going to have business owners, we're going to have transportation, we're going to have politicians, we're going to have faith leaders, nonprofits, all kinds of different people coming together to work on the problem, with housing first being the model. So what does the faith community do? Faith community, first and foremost, has moral authority. You may laugh at that and say, no, you don't. But if anybody's going to stand up and say, we have to take care of the poor, it should be people of faith. If anybody's going to say, we should be caring for the least among us, it should be people who say, I actually believe in a higher power. We should be able to have an organizing principle that is, God made all of us, including those who are dying on the streets, and God has called me to care for them. Every religious tradition has this call. And so that's the first thing that we can do. What we also realize with United to End Homelessness and the faith community is that we talk to a lot of people. We can organize our congregations. And so when we need to mobilize people to go to a city council meeting and say, actually, some of us want you to spend money on housing or mental health or wraparound services. Actually, there's some of us who live here and love these people and love those who are also against us, but still, we would like to mobilize. And so that's another thing that United to End Homelessness is asking the faith community to do, to be housing champions, to be ready when it's called, to be the people in the room that say, yes, please, as opposed to those who say, hell no. And so that's another thing that we can do. The problem is, in the faith community, and I can't speak for anybody but some Christians, the problem is that when you ask pastors, would you please lead your congregation forward to fight, to champion for the poor, they say, no politics from the pulpit. And so I get knocked down a lot from people who say, this is too hot of an issue, I don't want to talk about it in my church. I perhaps am an idiot, because I think I'd like to talk about it in my church, and if this gets crazy, now we've got something to talk about. But I just don't understand that, and that's made me crazy. Well, you know, Orange County, we just can't talk about the poor. Really? Because they're dying on our streets now. Is this who we're going to be? And so the faith community can move forward in that. But the political aspect, so recently, San Clemente has had a lot of fighting about those that live in tents on North Beach. And the social media community had started to call for people to beat them up, to burn down their tents, to hurt them. And I thought, you know what, I actually feel really good about standing up for the rights of those who shouldn't die by vigilantism in my city. And so my congregation decided to write a letter to the San Clemente Times, but also send it to the city council and say, we actually believe that these are humans and they have rights and they shouldn't be killed in the street. And somebody said to me, Pastor, don't do that. What if we get protesters? What if we get protesters in front of our church that want to fight against it? I said, they want to protest us loving the poor? I welcome those protesters. Now, they didn't come. But what are we doing if we can't stand up for those that God said, you have to take care of them. We have to take care of each other. And so that's the work that we continue to do. I finally feel that I'm doing exactly what God called us to do. When we spend time with those experiencing homelessness and hear their stories and have my heart break because of them, I think, this is what Jesus did. And if you're not a Christian and if you're from another tradition, you had leaders in your faith communities that did exactly this. I think Moses was political. I think Jesus was political. I'm sure Muhammad was political. And so this is a big part of what I'm trying to do, for better and for worse. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that. And you can see, as a person of faith, you can say, actually, I don't have an answer to how to fix this problem, but I know we're supposed to love each other. And perhaps you can be part of the organizing communities that can come together when we get the call to action. Right? It was Abraham Joshua Heschel who said, when he was walking in the civil rights movement, I was praying with my feet. And this is something we can do, is to pray with our feet and our voices and our hands. Thank you.